Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream Podcast. My name is Vince Nero, and today I am thrilled to introduce our guest, Gini Dietrich. You may know her as the author and founder of Spin Sucks, but also the creator of the PESO Model. And if you don't know what the PESO Model is, don't worry, we're going to get into it today in the podcast, but get out from under the rock you've been living in because it's a whole new world. Gini, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing?
I'm good. I feel like I need a light behind me that looks like a bumblebee.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
kind of jealous.
I have
like
to
it.
update this. This is our old logo.
Oh, is it?
So, yeah.
I like
So
it.
we just changed it a few weeks ago. Ginny, let's see. I think the reason we got together, one of the reasons we got together was we're talking back and forth. I was sharing our state of digital PR survey that we did.
Yep.
And it was funny. One of the things that grinded your gears, one of the things that frustrated you was, I think, this idea that there's very little collaboration between digital PR and the rest of the marketing teams, the brand teams, the marketers. It seems like, for the most part, primarily working with SEO. And I'll let you explain this a bit, but that was the intro to this. And it got us thinking about just this idea that there is such a divide between all marketing. For me, in our brand specifically, it's PR, SEOs, digital PRs, link builders. But when you think about the PESO model and a lot of the work you've done and the things that you talk about, you realize that it should be expanding way farther than that. So today in this podcast, I really want to get into how brands can think about that and why they should. I'll let you explain the PESO model a little bit. But before I do, I just want to remind everyone to like and subscribe, comment, rate, all that good stuff. That helps me bring in some great guests like Ginny. So, Ginny, let's get into it. Set the stage. Let people know what Spin Sucks is, and then let's get into the PESO model.
Sure. So Spin Sucks it started as a blog. We were in this weird season, I would say, where social media was becoming a thing and executives were like, I think this social media thing is just for the kids and we don't really need to worry about it for our business. So you had that going on. You had this whole idea of owning your narrative and controlling your brand story and doing that through content and through blogging. There was an opportunity to start to look at amplifying your message through paid social and certainly through Google ads and things like that. And so it was this weird season where we were just trying to figure out like what was going on. We're going through that right now too, in a similar way with artificial intelligence, right? We're all just trying to figure out what's going on and how we're going to apply it to our jobs and how do we use it and how does it make us more effective and is it going to replace us? But this was probably 2010, 2011 when all these changes were coming. And so internally we were like, if we are going to tell clients that they should own their narrative and tell their brand story through blogging, then we should probably figure it out ourselves. And so we launched a blog. And at the time it was called The Fight Against Destructive Spin, but Spin Sucks was the URL, spinsucks.com. And eventually as it gained popularity and notoriety and all those kinds of things, we eventually did away with the Fight Against Destructive Spin and just went with Spin Sucks. But today, it does coaching, it has online courses, it does professional development, it's still a content machine, it's still the media empire that we have, but that's the genesis of where it came from.
Yeah, and you've been doing it for 20 odd years, right?
The blog launched I think it launched in 2009, and it was really bad. Really bad. Every year on our anniversary, I republish the first blog post just so that people can see you just have to start because
That's funny. Yeah, I like that.
Horrible. It's really embarrassing how bad it was. It didn't start to gain traction till probably 2012. And that's when we started to understand link building and SEO and optimizing and long tail keywords. That's when we started to really understand all of those things that go into it. And that's what helped it to gain some popularity. We made some other changes, editorial changes, things like that as well. So I would say 13 years is how long it's been going.
Yeah.
Effectively.
And clearly a lot has changed in that time. But one of the big things that you did during that time was, and this is trademark too, right? The PESO model.
Yep.
Yeah. Can you briefly explain the PESO model for people who don't know what it is?
Yeah, the PESO model is paid, earned, shared, and owned media, which in and of itself is not copyrightable or interesting. It's in the framework that we created to accompany it. So we hear lots and lots all the time that people love the PESO model and they love the graphic and they love to show executives that these are the things that we can do from both a PR and marketing perspective. And when you throw the graphic up on a screen, you can visibly see a CEO go, hello, like they finally get it, right? But one of the biggest challenges we find is that people just pull tactics from each media type. So they might do some social media advertising and they have news releases and they do some social media and then they do some blogging and they call it the PESO model. And that is not the PESO model. That is not the copyrighted framework that we have. The real value comes into what you were saying in your intro, when you integrate it and you start to work together and use the media types to amplify the others so that you can measure it to the things that matter to the business.
Yeah, expanding on that a little bit, in one of your recent newsletters, you talked about how, let's just say, marketers are stuck in channel first marketing. This mindset where I am a social media manager and that's all I'm thinking about. And maybe I can throw something to my PR team, but for the most part, it ends there. It ends at the handoff, right? If that even occurs.
Fair.
So let's dig into a little bit of this like cross-channel amplification and what that flywheel or what that, it's kind of cyclical nature kind of looks like and how it should. In that post, and I'll link to it, you gave some really good examples. But let's hear you walk through some of them.
So I'm going to use a really simple example just to demonstrate this. And of course, it's more complicated and more sophisticated than this, but I'll use this just to simplify it. Let's say that you're doing a state of digital PR study survey. Okay. You send it out, you get all the responses, you collate all the data, you put together a report, you put it on your website behind a landing page, and you hope that people who come to your website will download it and share it and all those kinds of things. Great. Now what? And truthfully, that's where people end, right? They create something like that. They create a white paper or an ebook or something like that. And then they don't understand why nobody's coming to the website to download it. It's because that's just one piece of it. So let's call that your owned media, your content. Now you have to use email and social and media, earned media, your media relations, and you have to amplify it through paid media. You have to do all of those things to help. So if you have an email list, you should definitely email it, and don't email it just once. Email it multiple times, and you can set up triggers so that if somebody has downloaded it, they don't get another email. If somebody has not, or they haven't opened, or they haven't clicked, like you can set up these emails to get based on what people's actions are. So that's number one. And number two is to give it extra legs and to ensure that you're doing all the right things in terms of getting links to your website and building your domain authority and all those kinds of things. You should do some media relations. And so you should take pieces of your study and target it to specific journalists, influencers, podcasters, newsletter authors, and say, hey, we think this piece of this study would be really interesting to your audience, and here's why. Now, they're going to be producing content of their own on it and linking back to the study on your website. So now you're driving people back to the website and you're doing all the things that you need to from an SEO perspective. You have a landing page for your study. So now let's put some money behind it and let's do some Google ads and let's do some Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn ads and give it an extra boost to amplify it and get it to new audiences. And then of course you're going to share it. So take pieces of your study, create infographics, create YouTube shorts, do things that are going to amplify it to the people who already know who you are, and then let them share it with their audiences too. So now, instead of just having it on your website as one downloadable piece of content, you've used the other media types to help amplify it and get it out there to current and new audiences.
Yeah, in essence, it sounds, and not to boil down all that goes into this, but it's like having a distribution strategy seems to be what most people are missing.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you said this too. You create something and then maybe you hand it off, but
Right.
that doesn't happen. And it's It happens in every size organization. We work with gigantic companies. It happens there, and it happens in organizations that my friends run that are tiny. Like people just don't. And that's where the real value of the PESO model comes in. If you're using the framework appropriately, is in actually breaking down those silos and talking to one another. And Vince saying to Ginny, hey, we just produced this great study. Can you do your work to get it out there? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny because this idea of like collaboration, I've noticed this on Reddit sometimes. Like I'll mention SEO. I wanted to do a post that was like, what do PRs wish they knew about SEO? And the responses I got were like, if you think PR has anything to do with SEO, you're in the wrong place.
You were waiting to say that.
It's like there is, and I even feel this when you talk about this digital PR thing versus kind of more traditional PR, there's still a lot of that rub. I've got people rolling their eyes at my study when I share it on the public relations Reddit thread, or talking with people who are more, and there's, what is digital PR? I don't even, like, why even calling it that? Why, this is ridiculous. So there's a little bit of this, at least I feel, of this kind of ingrained, this is our lane, you stay in your lane. Let the higher ups worry about how these should cross over. But let's take digital and traditional PRs, because I know you have more of a PR background. Why do you think there is such a divide between the two?
I'm filtering. Number one, it's human nature. Human nature is to protect what's ours. We just do that as human beings. And the idea of collaborating and bringing each other along is really foreign to most human beings. And it's really foreign to Americans because that's not how our society works. When you add on top of it the chaos of what's going on in the world, what's going on in our country, and all the changes that artificial intelligence is bringing, now it makes us even more, okay, I'm going to hold on to my fiefdom because I'm actually worried I'm going to lose my job. And when I'm worried I'm going to lose my job, I'm not going to share, because then in my mind, I become indispensable. Nobody, of course, is indispensable, but that's how human beings think, right? It's a mindset shift. And I think the other challenge is that one of the things that I hear a lot from what I'll call the more traditional communicator is we're focused on brand awareness. We don't focus on revenue. We don't focus on results. And it's such an old mindset, because that's why they don't have a seat at the table. And that's why they're not getting promoted. And that's why their advice is not being taken, because they're thinking about it from the perspective of 1980 instead of 2025.
Yeah, it is weird. Like so it feels like the pendulum is swinging a little bit towards something that you talked about a lot, which is like PR is a future of marketing, in that you have to get your brand out there. Too many companies and brands focus on one specific strategy, and you're missing out on the brand recognition. So on the one hand, that is branding, that is such a good piece of the puzzle. But I think the good branding teams do it in a way that you're saying, like, even if you're all about brand awareness, at the end of the day, you have to report to the CFO, the CEO. Like, the bottom line is what's going to matter. Whether or not you're an agency working for someone, or a consultant, or you're an in-house marketer, like, if you're not making money, you're not going to hold on to your job. So like, it makes sense that you should be thinking, how can we maximize everything we do by working across platforms? But it just doesn't seem like it's happening. So I guess the question in there buried is like, why do you think that there's a divide between that kind of like bottom line and all of the marketing efforts?
We actually were just having similar conversation yesterday internally here. And one of the things that we see our clients do pretty consistently and we're trying to change this, is they go to paid media first because it's measurable and they can show an immediate return on investment, right? So when a CEO says, hey, what are the results of what you're doing? They would rather say we generated X number of leads that converted into X number of sales qualified leads and we influenced X amount of revenue, versus we did that and we're also building the brand for long term, but we don't have the same kinds of results. So it's a harder conversation. And I think one of the things the PESO model does incredibly well when you're implementing it correctly is it allows you to do both, because you're measuring against the things that an executive and a chief financial officer cares about from a financial perspective, but also showing that as you're doing those things, you're also building the long-term brand that will allow you to continue to generate leads. So like you can't continue to generate leads just from paid media alone. It's a short-term result. So you have to be able to do both. But the reason we don't, and I'm saying collectively we don't, is because the brand building is harder to measure.
Yeah. Let's dig into that. What are some better ways people can be thinking about building the brand? Because obviously this has repercussions across all the digital PR efforts. I feel like it's the same problem that people are having.
Yep. Yeah. It depends. It depends on the organization. It depends on the goals, right? It depends on all those things. But you really want to look at the kinds of things that you're doing that can affect sales or donors or volunteers or whatever the goal is, right? And in many cases, it requires you to use your left brain, which most of us are right brain creatives, so it's hard, right? So I always say make friends with somebody who understands data and tell them what you're trying to achieve, because they can help you with that. And then you can use that data to tell the story. Have them pull the data that you need or tell you how to pull it if you don't have somebody internally to do it. And then have them explain to you what the data says. And then you use your storytelling capability to demonstrate this is what we're doing. Yes, we did generate this number of leads and we did influence this amount of revenue. While we did that, we also did this and this. And it starts to change the conversation. One of the things I always say to our clients is, if your executive team is asking for X, provide that and also provide Y, because eventually they're going to say to you, I don't need this stuff over here anymore because this is vanity feel-good metrics. Keep going on this path. And when you have that conversation, and you will have that conversation, that's when you know you've won the battle.
Yeah, I'm thinking through this as you're talking. It's like a lot of our customers and listeners are agencies where you're hired to do a specific task. And with majority of them are SEOs who do link building, digital PR. They're going to try to raise brand authority, which can help bring in organic traffic. But like when it comes to bottom line, like some of these efforts are a few notches off from bottom line. So what can agencies do? Like, how have you helped agencies think through this or collaborate better maybe with just the internal teams? What are some good connectors maybe for agencies?
We always look at multi-touch attribution. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that agencies in general make is they do last touch attribution, which means what is the last thing that somebody did before they converted to whatever the goal is, a customer, a revenue, a license, a seat, whatever it happens to be, right? So what was the last thing they did? Because that's the easiest thing to measure. And usually the last thing that they did was see an ad or something that you paid for. So then paid media gets all the credit. That's not true, because a lot of the work that we do from a digital PR perspective is bringing them into that funnel. And sometimes it's top, most of the time it's top of the funnel, sometimes it's middle, but all of those activities, you can't bring somebody to conversion without all of that. So we really focus on how do we show the multi-touches and meeting people where they are in their customer journey versus the last thing that they did. And it's a harder thing to do for sure. And there isn't one uniform way to do it. But if you're raising brand authority and you're increasing links to the website and you're showing, because of that, the client is showing up in generative and traditional search, you have all of these opportunities to show that without that, you're not going to get the leads. So I actually have a really good example about, it was probably right at the beginning of the year. So right after the holidays, a client called me and he said, "Hey, I'm thinking about cutting the budget." And I knew this conversation was coming because I'd heard rumblings about what was going on inside the business. "I'm thinking about cutting your budget. I'm thinking about cutting Google ads entirely. And I don't want to do anything that's going to be optimized for the website. So let's just keep the website as it is, but I don't want to do any content. I don't want to do any SEO. I don't want to do any link building." And I said, "Oh, okay, it hurts us. Sure, because they're cutting our budget." But at the same time, I was like, that's so dumb. So because we had been tracking multi-touch attribution for 2 years, I was able to go into the data and say, okay, this is what will happen if you do those things. And if your goal is to not only compete with the big guys, which is one of their goals, but to eventually be sold, you can't do that if you're not showing up in search and if you're not building your domain. And if all of your competitors are showing up in Google ads and you're not, you can't do those things. So I demonstrated it in terms of what their long-term goals are. And he goes, "Okay, never mind." All right. I mean, I spent probably 15 hours building the case.
Yeah.
And it was less, certainly we wanted to keep the client in the budget, but it was less for that reason and more just because I wanted him to really understand that if you do this, you can, absolutely. This is the consequence. And I think we don't help clients make that jump. We don't help them go from, we're going to cut our budget to, you can do that for sure, but this is the consequence of doing so.
Yeah. I heard one time, a long time ago, it was like somebody was explaining marketing and PR and advertising and how they work together. As your customers driving down the highway and your competitors have billboards up, you have billboards up, you want to just be in sync with them, right? Like you need to just have that thing.
Yes.
And I guess that's what share of voice is and some of these other PR metrics. But like at the end of the day, I think that's a really compelling kind of way to think about it. And if you're talking about, okay, we're going to pull out all of the organic, it's like, all right, there goes 50% of your billboards or whatever. Yeah.
You're not going to even show up in generative search at all. That's stupid.
Yeah, we could go on for hours with this kind of stuff. So speaking of generative AI, I think it's a great transition to our last topic and this idea of something I alluded to earlier, this idea that PR is the future of marketing. This is something you've been saying a really long time. It's coming back, gaining steam from a couple other people online. But let's talk about that. What does this mean? Why now? Why is it resurging? Let's start there.
It's a good question. So I think that we've all become aware of Google's EAT, right? Expertise, experience, authority, and trust. And because AI is so profound and prolific, and we can use it to make ourselves more efficient, the marketers will screw everything up like we always do. We ruin everything. What we're finding, and I think what the point that Google is making without actually saying it, is that you can pump out all sorts of content now. And it takes 30 seconds instead of 3 hours. You can pump it out. And I know you've seen content in all the places where you're like, AI wrote this. You didn't even try. You didn't even go in and edit it. You just copied and pasted and published. And it's terrible. You know that it's right. So I think the point is that you can do that for sure. And you can have it draft an outline. You can have it draft a first draft, but it's the beginning, not the end. And really what you need to do is then go in and please edit it, and then go in and add your experience and your expertise, because that's what's going to make the content different. And that's going to demonstrate who you are as a thought leader, who your business is, what your brand stands for, all those kinds of things that nobody else can demonstrate, because you're the only one with those two the experience and the expertise. And so when from a generative search perspective, that's what that's what the AI is crawling for, is your experience and your expertise. And if your content doesn't demonstrate that, it's not going to show up at all. So we always say to clients, like, this is great. Let's continue to do this. And if you want AI to draft it for you, that's fine. But we have to go in and add what makes it different for us. We have to add in subject matter experts. We might want to add in the customer story. We add in our expertise and our experience to make it interesting. And that's what's going to rise it to the top of the search results.
Yeah. Have you seen a noticeable uptick when you do that kind of stuff for clients, like showing up in generative AI when they add their
fast?
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It happens really fast.
Yeah. This is, I think, going to be the big topic for the next couple of years. It's whatever it takes to get an AI to generative AI. But to put a bow, I think, on all this, it seems like what you're saying with the PESO model and how this can tie into AI strategies is like, A, don't do anything in a silo, right? Like you should be thinking about the big picture. And B, thinking about how you could do something better than what your competitors are doing. Or competitors, in this case, also being AI, right? Like you're competing with AI for
absolutely, yes, absolutely
to do better.
Yes,
and I think that is like a mindset shift for a lot of people. Some people think of it as a collaborative tool or a way to scale your content, but it sounds like your thought is really, you can use it as a crutch maybe, but at the end of the day, if you don't have anything new to say, you're not going to get noticed.
And also, please just pay attention in LinkedIn and read people's comments. It probably happens in Reddit too. Reddit scares me, so I don't go there. But like, you can tell who has had the AI summarize the content and
the
they write the
worst.
comment, and it's the worst.
It's really is
terrible.
I wish you could report people on LinkedIn at this point, because it's
so bad. I kind of want to be like, dude, I know AI wrote this for you. This is gross.
I've seen some people call out and nobody responds. They don't. But I wanted to do that the other day too. I was like, come on, buddy. Gini, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. I highly recommend everybody check out Spin Sucks. I have a great newsletter, podcast, blog, and get familiar with the PESO model if you're not familiar. And like I said at the beginning, like, subscribe, but more importantly, comment, interact with this post. I'm going to be putting out a lot of stuff, break this up, because the kind of stuff you can ask questions with, and I'm sure Gini is more than happy to answer. And you can find her on LinkedIn as well as all of those other areas, her website, and
except Reddit.
Except for Reddit. Yeah, we'll stay off of Reddit. I just got banned from the SEO of Reddit, so there you go. Maybe I won't be on there. That's a story for another time.
That's awesome. I got to hear that story sometime.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Thank you to Gini once again.
Thanks for having me, Vince. Always good to hang out with you.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everyone.